If you're a regular listener of our podcast, you might notice that the sound design of this episode is a bit more sparse than usual. That's because the main protagonists of this story requested that the songs from the Workcenter of Jerzy Grotowski and Thomas Richards, which are a crucial part of the story, not be mixed with other audio or spoken over.
Hi, I'm Adam.
And I'm Nitzan.
And you're listening to Stories from the East and West.
This is episode 2 of a special two-parter on Jerzy Grotowski. So if you haven't heard episode 1 yet, you might want to go back in the feed and listen to that first.
These 2 episodes were co-produced with the HowlRound Theatre History Podcast. So we're going to hand over the microphone to its host Mike Lieger and our producer Piotr, who investigated the full story about this enigmatic figure.
Zlín, Praha, Warszawa, Madrid, London, Paris, New York, Casablanca.
Where you see a kind of totality of the human presence.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is exactly
Tak jak my w życiu, nigdy do końca nie ma odpowiedzi i nie będzie. To jest takie...
Stories from the Eastern West.
Hi, this is Michael Lieger from the Theater History Podcast.
And I'm Piotr Wołczko from Stories from the East and West.
Just to recap, Episode 1 finished with Grotowski being forced to leave Poland due to the imposition of martial law. Having had to give up everything he had been working on, he went to New York to stay with his friend Andrzej Gregory, and wasn't really sure what would be his next step. Would he find a way of carrying on the research he had begun in Poland with the Theater of Sources?
He started lecturing at Columbia University, but soon enough Grotowski received an offer from the University of California in Irvine to continue his work there.
In this new phase, called the Objective Drama Program, Grotowski's team further refined the ritual movements and songs of tradition they had been researching, inviting experts in traditional practices such as Sufi whirling and Haitian singing to give demonstrations.
The goal was to find which songs and movements in particular were objective, meaning that they should have the same effect on every performer who used them.
Occasionally, groups of young actors from Yale University were selected to come to Irvine to observe and take part. One of these young actors was Thomas Richards.
So I met him. It was strange because I was a young actor. I was in my early 20s. Now, and I was even, I even wanted to be a star. I didn't know whether I wanted to be a movie star or a Broadway star, but in any case, I had many of these kind of ambitions, and I went to work with Grotowski, who was not doing theater anymore also, which was very strange for me. When I was hearing these songs of tradition, it had a kind of impact on me, a kind of calling. It awoken something inside of me. It gave me the sensation that I was hearing someone from my ancestry singing. And this was a very, very deep thing for me because I'm half black and half white. I come from a mixed family. I grew up in New York City, completely disconnected from every kind of African tradition. I went to a Jewish school. In fact, I wanted desperately somehow to be black or to understand my blackness, but without any means to. And when I met this Polish man with a white beard who kind of looked like Santa Claus, Grotowski had a very big body, it was very bizarre and strange to encounter my African tradition somehow through him.
Richards eventually became part of Grotowski's core team. As he explains, the 2 most important things that Grotowski passed to him were the work on acting and something they called the songs of tradition.
What is the work of the actor made up of? The capacity to live the same thing again and again and again and again, and each time it should be alive. It's very hard to do. So, in order to do that, we need to break down and make an analysis of human behavior. And our work needs to be on human behavior. Stanislavski even said that an actor is a master of physical actions. Physical actions being not something just physical, that was a term he used, but it's the smallest beats of human behavior.
And what about the songs of tradition? What are they exactly?
They're designed to help a human being to recuperate contact with that which is hidden. Your daily life, my daily life, all of our daily life is made up fundamentally of a more superficial part of oneself. We smile before we really smile. We frown before we really frown. We pretend to be humble when we're not. The song is a certain kind of call, and you're singing this song, and the words, you're not quite sure what it means, but you hear already in your mind a kind of intention that's inside the song, which are basically prayers, a way of relating yourself to something that's much greater than yourself. And then a kind of process starts to appear, which is all these levels of your human nature, which are intensifying somehow through the work on the song. It starts to stack up like a ladder, one on top of the other, and a kind of transcendence takes place. Grotowski used the term verticality.
But this period in the United States was coming to an end. Grotowski was beginning to feel pressure from the university to present his work, which he wasn't prepared to do. His team needed a more permanent base, where they could continue their research unimpeded.
After his funding ran out for Objective Drama, he was invited to the small industrial town of Pontedera in Tuscany. So he had a strong connection to Italian scholars, to Italian practice, and he was given a base in a place called Vallicelli in an old wine store to work with a small group of actors on Arta's vehicle.
No More Performances, what we're working on are songs of tradition, and we're working on them inside precise performative structures that we create, which are kind of personal, not personal but they're objective, but they're personal in the sense of they're made for the performers. They're made to have an impact on the performers, and that work is witnessed. We're calling these kind of works actions.
And Grotowski wanted to reframe some of the terminology. So it's not audience, it's witness. It's not actor, it's doer. It's someone not being someone else, it's doing certain things in front of and with the witnesses. So it's research, investigating these songs, these techniques, putting them into a montage structure to create sequences of actions, exploring the work of the doer.
Grotowski's work on art as vehicle was made more difficult by his long-running health problems. But, as Richards explains, this did not deter him in any way.
He was quite sick at the time that I was working with him. So he was an example of a kind of impeccability that was so strong. Literally, when you sat with him in a room or when you worked with him, you were working with a tiger. No question about it. You would not get out of the door, the rehearsal door, if you had not accomplished the deepest, most high possible thing for you to do. You don't get out the door. And since his knowledge was undisputable, meaning I had no question that I was in the hands of a true theater master, and not only of theater.
Grotowski knew he was dying. He'd always had a very poor health, but particularly in the Italian period of his work, he knew he was dying. So he spent a lot of time from 1985 till his death in 1999 in the process of transmitting his knowledge and his experience to Thomas Richards, who then carried that work on.
I had probably gotten as far as I could with Grotowski's story without visiting the Workcenter and experiencing the work for myself. I decided to hop on the very next plane to Italy. As my plane took off from Warsaw Airport, I really didn't know what to expect. As it happens, my connecting flight to Pisa was delayed by 10 hours due to airport strikes. And by the time I got to the old vineyard where the Workcenter has its home, it was pitch dark. It was only the next morning that I got to appreciate the place that Grotowski had founded 30 years ago. Imagine orange Tuscan stone buildings, surrounded by trees and meadows, green rolling hills, and mountains far off in the distance. It definitely seemed like the kind of place that Grotowski would have spent his final years, perfecting his life's work. I couldn't wait to see the performances that I'd only heard and read about. But first, I wanted to talk to Thomas Richards and get him to tell me more about this place, and how it had developed such a reputation for secrecy.
The Workcenter was founded in 1986. And let's say it was we were pretty isolated. Grotowski was inviting people to come see the work, but it was always 5 people at a time, 1 person, then 3 months nobody, then another person. It was something very, very, very slow and gradual process, and this was important for different reasons. First, because Grotowski wanted to be incredibly clear that he was not doing theater anymore. He wanted there to be no confusion. Second, because we were young. We were young and we were working with Grotowski, meaning we had everything to learn. That means we needed to be protected. We needed time to be able to climb a mountain really fast. And you can't even imagine, I guess you can imagine, the expectation that people had when they came to see the work, you understand? The pressure was enormous. Voila, Grotowski, who the greatest director of the 20th century. Okay, he's done his paratheater, he's done the theater of sources, now he's doing artist vehicle. Let's go see what it is. Okay, here we come. All of the so-called friends, right? Yes, many friends, but you know how things work.
Jerzy Grotowski died on the 13th of January 1999 at the age of 65 after a long period of illness. His ashes were scattered at the sacred hill Arunachala in southern India, a place of great importance to Grotowski. As for the Workcenter, it now somehow had to continue without the man who had started the whole thing.
We needed to realize certain things. First, we weren't Grotowski. We have a different destiny. What is our destiny? You see, he could, because he had reached such an apex in his career as a theater director, that he could say to people, okay, I'm not doing theater, I'm doing pure research, please give me funding. And he received that funding, enough to make the work go on. Who knew Thomas Richards? Who knew Mario Biagini, my colleague for the last 32 years? Almost nobody. The few 20 people here and there who had come to see the work, who had been deeply impacted by the work, but we have almost no public persona also. So what were we going to do? We needed to recognize what was our family. Were we a religion? No, we're not a religion. We all come from different cultures, many different religions. We're not a religion. What are we? We are, very strange, but we are performers. Our family is the performing arts. So somehow we needed to create a logic that we exist. That means what? It means to be of use. So over the years since his death, we've constructed the ways that we are useful. And one of the ways that we are useful is to perform. The other way is through pedagogy. We teach, both giving experience of what it is to work on objectivity of ritual, but not pretending to teach people how to do that in a short-term situation, which is impossible. But we can teach them about theater craft. They're actors who are coming from around the world. Somehow they are very deeply, I see, drawn to this work on Songs of Tradition. They each have gifts. They're very gifted for this kind of work as well.
One of the young actors I talked to was Linda Mebtouche, a member of the Workcenter studio in residence.
I am half Algerian and half French, so I was using some Algerian song, and it was really strong for me to enter in this territory. You go into the work, and it's a question of death, of life in some way. Like, you need to do it because you don't have tomorrow to do it.
I also talked to Alejandro Tomas Rodriguez, a former member of the Open program run by Mario Biagini, and now touring with his Latin-influenced rock group, Engine.
This place was very, very alive, and people were working very hard They have a workspace that you can work 8 hours per day and dedicate yourself just to do this. And it was exactly what I was looking for. And here I discovered this work on singing. It's a very particular approach, and the theater structures, the performative structures contain this effervescence, this living flow, this life.
Finally, I spoke to Thomas Richard's wife, Cecile. Originally from Belgium, she's been a member of the Workcenter for the past 16 years.
We live here in the countryside, in a place we don't know. We don't have the family. Some people have the family really far away. They live in very modest conditions. But every day they come here and they are here. And they're ready.
The people who come here to work at the centre most definitely make a lot of personal sacrifices to do so. Obviously, this kind of intensive work in a small group, cut off from the rest of the world, gives rise to suspicion from those on the outside, which I guess is something that Grotowski faced even in his early days in Apollo. Though it is hard to deny how much Grotowski achieved as a theatre director and teacher, his methods have also been called manipulative and dictatorial. Some performers, like Ryszard Cieślak, had a very hard time adjusting to a normal life after leaving Grotowski's close-knit team and the psychologically strenuous work they'd been doing.
Grotowski's attracted a lot of controversy generally throughout his work. His practice, his performances were called elitist, whereas I think he was just very carefully managing the theatre experience for small numbers of people. It wasn't mass-scale kind of work. Paratheatre took people outside of their daily routines, took them into new communities, established different ways of working and being with each other. What it didn't really do was then take responsibility for how people entered back into the real world. It perhaps left them high and dry a bit, left them a bit exposed perhaps. I think some people found ways to re-enter, some people might have found that difficult. But actually I kind of am sympathetic. I think, do we really have that responsibility? People can come and join those experiences if they want. They don't have to participate. It's in a way up to them to deal with the aftermath. I think Grotowski's an easy target. There's questions about his political engagement. He's a controversially interesting figure, but I think artists should have some aspect of controversial. Otherwise, they're not really pushing at the boundaries of the form.
But despite these controversies, Grotowski's work still attracts an incredible amount of interest around the globe. As for the Workcenter team, each year they travel to 4 different continents and 8 to 10 different countries, holding acting workshops and performing to new audiences, who are able to witness the pieces and songs of tradition for themselves. The next morning, I was eagerly awaiting the first work to be presented, the living room. The group of 10 or so guests, including me, arrived at the entrance to the Workcenter. We were invited inside and told to sit anywhere we like inside the performance space, which had been set up like someone's living room, with tables of food and chairs arranged around the space. Meanwhile, members of the Workcenter circled round, offering us tea and coffee. For those witnessing the work for the first time, there was a definite sense of anticipation in the air. When and how would it start? What exactly was going to happen? These interactions immediately signaled that what was about to follow was meant to be something which the doers and witnesses were going to experience together. The performers assumed their places, and Thomas Richards entered wearing a backpack. As the songs resonated through the stone walls of the Workcenter, it was impossible not to feel shivers. As the piece progressed, raw emotions were laid bare and infused with something that was beyond just emotion. Maybe this was the verticality that Richards had described to me. At times, a kind of strange, in the sense of something you don't usually see, kind of spontaneity took over, with performers interacting and laughing together with the witnesses. The culmination of the living room is a birthday party, A cake is brought out and candles lit. There is a celebration of singing and movement which explodes into something resembling pure joy. It's hard to walk away from something like this without taking something with you, even if you can't really explain to other people or yourself what it is exactly. The living room was singing, movement, storytelling, and also something else entirely. It was something closer to painting or poetry than anything I'd ever seen before in the theatre. The other works I saw over the next few days, such as The Underground and Sin Fronteras, only added to this kind of strange sense of having witnessed something remarkable. And that would stay with me long after my return to Warsaw. I was going back, with the feeling that I was only just scratching the surface of both the work and Grotowski himself, but I definitely got the sense that, like Grotowski, and the actors from his early days in Poland, the people who come to the Workcenter all seem to be looking for something. But have they found it?
We hear this phrase, Grotowski was one of the greatest directors, and it's so strange because if we look at his history, we see that in fact he was only creating theater performances in a 10-year period. And these performances, they had such a resonance throughout the world, not only in Poland, but throughout the world. Why? What did he really do?
People were upset that Grotowski had left the theatre. They felt they wanted this leading world figure from Poland to carry on making theatre performances. Grotowski felt he'd exhausted this possibility. He wanted to move on and develop new things.
He looked around in the world and he saw, okay, TV and film are already, back in the 1950s, they're already taking somehow, and they will take, the place of storytelling. Normal storytelling is going in that direction. The death of theater will be if it's just a bad imitation of TV or film.
Grotowski was a man that was questioning every day what is the potential inside a human being, what to do with this potential for this individual, for this individual, for this one, for this one.
Grotowski never married, he had no children, he was a workaholic. He totally lived his work. There's no separation between when he worked and life.
To była jednak dla mnie jakaś tajemnica.
As a matter of fact, it was a kind of a mystery to me. Actually, I think that mystery is necessary, meaning that in art I think we shouldn't completely dot all the I's, but just like in life. There's never a final answer and there never will be.
Nigdy do końca nie ma odpowiedzi i nie będzie. Tak idziemy pod widnokrąg, tak nie ma.
We are kind of walking towards the horizon. That's the feeling I have, that we are walking and we'll never get the complete answer. Because if we did, we probably couldn't go on living.
Bo gdybyśmy dostali, to pewnie już byśmy nie mogli żyć dalej.
This special two-part episode of Stories from the East and West was produced by Culture.pl in collaboration with HowlRound's Theatre History podcast.
It was hosted by Adam Żuławski and me, Nitzan Reisner, and co-presented by Michael Lieger and Piotr Wołoczko. It was written and produced by Piotr, edited by Adam, and scored by Wojciech Oleksiak.
We'd also like to thank Maja Komorowska, Paul Elaine, and Thomas and Cecile Richards for making this episode possible.
If theatre and history are your thing, then be sure to check out HowlRound's Theatre History podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
If you want to see notes from this episode, tap the show art in your app or go to sftew.com. There you can find out more about Jerzy Grotowski, Thomas Richards, and the Workcenter in Pontedera.
Our next episode arrives in the new year on January 3rd. In the meantime, wishing everybody a Merry Christmas
Merry Christmas
and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.